Hello and welcome everyone to the February One-Day Summit Mind Body Toolkit for Change and Transformation. My name is Oyemi Kalima-At and I will be your host for this session. And this session is titled Solve a Somatic Approach to Self-Soothing for Internal and External Conflict. And this is with Cheng Thom, who is one of my favorite people in the whole entire world. So I'm really excited to share this space with her. Cheng Thom is a certified somatic sex educator, qualified mediator, clinical hypnotherapist, and certified professional coach based in Toronto, Canada. She is also the author of 5 award-winning books in various genres. Cheng's work focuses on the intersection of social justice, pleasure activism, and transformative approach to healing conflict. A noted speaker and practitioner of somatic wellness, healing, and group process facilitation, Cheng Thom supports individuals and groups who are seeking to repair relationships and make transformative change. She also teaches as an adjunct facility at the Institute for the Study of Somatic Sex Education. Welcome, Cheng.
Hello, everyone. Ayumi, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and orientation for everyone to our Zoom container for today. It's so helpful, and I just want to gently remind everyone, or invite everyone, remind and invite, to please send some appreciation to our host, Oyemi, and also to Jamila, who is here shadowing today. Without these two wonderful people, I would be in a lot of trouble for this presentation. So big thank you to both of them. And big thank you to you for showing up at 9 a.m. if you are here with me in the Eastern time zone, or earlier if you're anywhere westwards of this on Turtle Island and from wherever you are in the world. So many wonderful places around the world represented here. I am calling in today from Toronto, which is also called Toronto, both of which are names that come from Indigenous naming traditions. Toronto is Treaty 13 territory with the Mississaugas of the Credit River, and it is also part of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum, which is an ancient agreement between the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Anishinaabe peoples that stipulates that the land that is colonially known as the Great Lakes region here on Turtle Island, also known as North America, is meant to be shared and stewarded in the spirit of collaboration and nonviolence for generations to come. Today, Toronto is home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. And when I think about the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, as well as the history of Indigenous and settler relations on this continent, I think that the practice of embodiment and particularly conflict resolution, which is what we will be exploring specifically today, are absolutely and deeply and inextricably tied to that conversation. We cannot do embodiment without practicing an awareness of who we are and where we come from. And we cannot practice conflict resolution without being aware of the metaphorical water in which we swim, which is to say, the legacies of colonization, cultural genocide, and other forms of systemic oppression that shape the way that we experience life and conflict with one another. So there will be a part of today's presentation that is explicitly attending to power relations in the practice of conflict resolution, but I do invite us all to try and weave like a deeper awareness of systemic oppression into all of our time here at this wonderful one-day summit and in general in our lives. So I might just take a moment of pause with that and invite you to pause with me as we start to feel our way into this conversation on embodied conflict resolution and particularly techniques for feeling conflict in the body and soothing the intense sensation or dissociation that can come with conflict. Part of my work is that I practice as a community and workplace mediator um, with an embodiment approach as well as a trauma-informed approach. And something I've learned about conflict is that, shocker, most people are not fond of it. Raise your hand, your physical hand, if you are afraid of conflict. Yeah, okay. So let's just acknowledge that we're afraid of conflict. And if we wouldn't mind, Oyemi, if you wouldn't mind just opening the chat for a second, I would love for us just to share in the chat, if you're open to it, not if you're not, um, a little bit about our fear. So the prompt is, I am afraid of conflict because, and I invite you just to finish that phrase in the chat. I am afraid of conflict because losing important relationships. Yes. What else? Why else are we afraid of conflict? Because that person may not like me after because of rejection. I might lose myself, be abandoned. I worry what others will say. I don't want to hurt others. I'm afraid of conflict because I was socialized to go along. What will it uncover? I was bullied by a sibling. It feels bad, people pleasing, body sensations, fear of losing love. It triggers me. What will I say that I can't take back? The shame of being wrong. Don't want escalation to hurt myself or others. Wasting time because the person I'm in conflict with is afraid. Fear of displeasing the other person. I am afraid of conflict because of overwhelming emotions, because anger is not culturally acceptable. Will it reveal that I'm a bad person? Uncertainty of what the conflict is, because it is unpredictable. Fear of losing friendships or support or connection. Yes. And I'm just going to invite us to take a moment to pause and even stop sharing in the chat and even just notice if it's like, oh, it might be a little hard to stop sharing. It might be like, oh, I have something. And let's just see if we can pause together, even as we keep the chat open. See if we can pause. Yeah. And just notice what's happening in the body, like, whoa. We all have fears about conflict. And we can share that together. So I invite us now just to look at the screen and just like notice that there's human beings in there. Like, oh yeah, there's a face and there's a face and there's a name. You might even give a little smile if you want to, or if you don't want to smile, you give a monster face. You need to just notice there's a human being, there's human beings, and see what that does to the nervous system. We're just here holding and sharing our conflict fear together, being a little silly. Silly is okay. Monster face, smiley face, sad face. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then just sharing in the chat if you're open to it. What are you noticing in your body now? What are you noticing in your body now? Look at the screen. Ease, ease. Can laugh at myself. Need to shake it out. Yeah, shake it out if we want to. What else? I'm safe, not in conflict. It's not that scary. Always worse in my head than in real life. Permission, calmer, safe, relaxation. Looking at you makes me smile. Oh, well, that's nice. Excitement and gratitude. Interested. Connection as the way through. Yes, beautiful. Oh yeah, me, I'm just gonna ask us to pause the chat now. Thank you so much. Yeah, a few last shares coming in. Less activated, light. The desire for connection is greater than my fears. Yes, beautiful. So let's just take a moment even to pause with that. It's like, what happened just now? I was like, why are we afraid of conflict? And all these fears came spilling out. It's like this whole group, there's 345 people here. There's a lot of fear about conflict, which makes so much sense, all the sense in the world. We had all these reasons, past experience, traumatic experience, uncertainty, so many fears around the theme of others will hurt me or abandon me, or I will hurt others and then be abandoned. The attachment fear, right? A fear of wounding in the relationship. Yes. And then we pause just to notice connection with other people, like to get even like a physical hit of like awareness of somebody else. And probably because I'm spotlighted, the face you're looking at is mine, unless you chose gallery view and look for someone else's face. And so we're like, oh, let's smile. Let's be like kind of silly, right? Um, Maybe we did like a slither or a shake. And, you know, for some of us, that creates more ease. Like to land in connection, as somebody brilliantly said already, creates more ease in the wake of fear. And it's not just about the smile, although the smile is important. Also, it's about sharing the monster face or the silly face, sharing the fear itself, voicing emotion and sensation as a collective can help us to feel less alone, and feeling less alone, and it helps us to feel more okay. Yeah. And there's something that happens often around our fear of conflict um, that also has an element of shame. And I wonder, just raise your hands if you're like, yeah, I kind of feel ashamed when I think about my fear of conflict. Yeah, so there's some hands going up. Yeah. What's that about? I mean, on a cognitive level, the shame attached to conflict and fear of conflict is like, oh, I should be better at this. Like, I should be better at relationship. Um, I should be better at giving love to others. I should be better at receiving love from others. My conflict style is bad. I shouldn't be afraid of conflict. All of that sort of story. But in the body, how we might start to think of shame in relation to conflict as a protective mechanism that curls us inward. Like shame is a physical technology that is like sort of meant to keep us contained and shrinking, which prevents further provocation of future conflict. So there's even like a wisdom to that shame, except it also feels really bad. And in a highly complex social system, that mechanism of curling away and turning inward maybe actually isn't that helpful for all kinds of reasons. We have these, you know, beautifully developed prefrontal cortexes and very rich social etiquettes where we might need to participate. And so maybe that shame is not as helpful as it might have been when it was first evolutionarily developing. So how do we relieve our shame? I would suggest that we can start to unhook shame from fear, because those are two different things, two different and often unpleasant emotions, by voicing them in the group. Like creating a sense of okayness in this group of 300 or in a group of 4 or in a group of 2. It's okay for us to be scared. And it's okay for us to have conflict. It's okay for us not to know what to do. So we peel away that first layer of shame just by saying, who's afraid? Oh, me? Yes. Also, I am scared. And the shame starts to go away. And then we might start to be like, oh, yeah, anyone here just like totally at a loss? You know? And then we like can kind of giggle together, being a little bit silly or like a little bit like bouncy in response to conflict can also start to peel away shame. We have to be careful with humor and silliness when we're in conflict. Anybody know why? No, you don't have to answer that. It's because we want to treat conflict seriously. We don't want to make people feel that we are mocking them. We don't want to mock ourselves. It's not about mocking. It's about the ability to go inward and laugh at ourselves. So if we're trying to find laughter, which is often really helpful in a conflict situation, sometimes the first person we want to try to laugh at is ourselves. Like again, not in a mocking way, but just like, oh, you know, anyone here do anything that's is ridiculous when you're in a conflict? I do ridiculous things um like when I'm upset with people and I really need help, generally I'm like, no, I'm actually perfect and fine. Anyone else perfect and fine when you're really, yeah. And like, of course there's sadness that can come with that story, but it's a little bit funny. No, it's a little bit like, whoa, human beings were absurd. And, of course, we can take ourselves with real deep seriousness and tenderness and compassion at the same time. And when we have that flexibility, as we start to cultivate that flexibility of being able to laugh at ourselves, we start to release shame. And when we are able to laugh with others, maybe they start to release shame as well. And then we can be just in the fear place together. And then the togetherness, co-regulation, helps us to feel less afraid. And then we start to be able to be in a different place altogether with conflict and with fear. Hopefully that all makes sense. But if it doesn't, I invite you to put your questions in the Q&A box. And some of them I might be able to answer live, and some we'll answer during the Q&A portion later on. So I'd like to show you a graphic that I use, a few graphics that I use to teach about conflict very frequently. Oh, my screen is going a little haywire. Nope, there we go. Okay. Is a slide that is titled Swimming in the Conflict Sea. And on this slide is like a big whale or shark. I'm pretty sure it's a shark. A shark in the center, some water, and then all around the shark or the whale are smaller ocean creatures like a jellyfish, a seahorse, a turtle, and there are some words that we'll go into around those shapes on the slide. So when we think about conflict and the web of human relationship, I sometimes like to use the metaphor of swimming in the sea together. We're swimming in an ocean of relationship. And when we are in a group, whether that group is a family or a dyad pair, like a romantic relationship, or a parent-child dyad, or a classroom, or like a bigger group, like a community, a city, a world, continent, whenever we are in a group, there is always the potentiality or the potential for conflict present. That is to say, there's always conflict in the room, no matter what. Like, no matter how lovely we are, or how thoughtful we are, or how much we adore each other, how aligned we are with our values, there actually is always conflict present in a room. Maybe it's not active, and maybe it's not explicit, but there always is conflict present, at least in its potential. Why is that? There's a couple of reasons. And at a base level, at the level of the body and the level of sensation, the reason that conflict is always present in any given group is because we are always scanning, we're always neurocepting, right? This is scanning for danger, and the body is always sort of picking up on whether or not our needs are being met. And it's just the case that in a group, there are many, many, many physical or socio-emotional needs that might not be getting met at any given moment. Or maybe they are getting met, but we're sort of worried, or we're picking up hints that those needs might not get met. And the more complex the group, like the deeper the relationships, or the larger the group, or the more politically mixed or socially mixed the group is, the bigger those fears become. As soon as we land in a group, whether that's a group we're very familiar with, like a family, or a new group, like 400 people at a one-day summit online, we start to scan the environment for the possibility that our needs will not get met, which is to say, we start to scan for the possibility of danger. And when we start to pick up those hints, we start to feel that sensation, that fear of conflict start to emerge. Now, there's some interesting things that happen as we try to navigate this sea of potential conflict that we're always swimming in. So it depends on how we were raised and our own kind of personal orientation toward conflict. But I would say that in the dominant culture in which most of us live, dominant culture, dominant cultures, there tends to be a stigmatization of conflict or active conflict, like a pressure to not have any. And absolutely, especially in the professional world, I'm a workplace mediator, so I'm thinking about this a lot. In the professional world, there's like a high level of stigma attached in most workplaces or community groups to having active conflict. So what we will do then is try to keep the implicit conflict implicit and not explicit. Sometimes mediators will call this artificial harmony, which is when we have all this potential for conflict swimming in the background, but we are not acknowledging it because we're afraid to. Right? So we're all afraid of conflict. And sometimes the dominant culture norm is just to be like, nope, there's no conflict here. Love and light all around, right? Or we're all colleagues here, or we're all comrades. It really depends on where you are. But there's usually some kind of vibe that's like, there's no conflict here. And if we come back to the metaphor, we might think of all those implicit conflicts, those unmet needs swimming around and sort of being kept underwater. You know, there's a lot of pressure, push the fish underwater, right? When we're in a group and we're starting to feel conflict, there's often this pressure like, oh, I feel this fish of an unmet need, this fish of a conflict starting to pop its head up. And we're like, no, get back down, like shove that down. And you might even just do that with me just for fun. Like just notice a little conflict bubbling up and then like shove it right back down. Ugh, get under, you know? That is often how we are experiencing implicit conflict in group. And an example of that might be like in our families. I don't know about you, but when I go home to my family, my sisters and I sometimes have these like ancient conflicts we don't remember. And I'm like, God, it's just so irritating. You're always just saying these things that are irritating me. But then I'm like, no. Just like shove that under. Like, no. I don't want to wreck the family dinner. Anyone else? Anyone else experience stuff like that? Okay, I'm getting lots of hands up, funny face. Okay, great. So yes, that would be an example of a kind of a small interpersonal thing that we tend to shove under the water. But the metaphor, I think, still applies when we're talking about larger social conflicts as well. For example, I'm a person of color, and I'm often in rooms where like people of color or Black or Indigenous or racialized folks are in the minority. And whenever you bring up race, there's suddenly this like, whoa, feeling that happens, a really intense feeling that happens in the room. It's like, don't talk about that. And sometimes in the past, particularly, but still today, when I bring up racism or racialization in like more traditional classrooms, I'll get told not to, like don't do that, right? And this is the thing about larger scale social oppressions or social conflicts. There's a lot of pressure to like not talk about things like racial injustice or to not talk about homophobia or transphobia, right? So there's a huge pressure to not do that. And that's quite socially weighted. It relates to power and to privilege and to the status quo. That's implicit conflict. So we build up all this pressure around implicit conflict. You know, never talk about how your sister irritates you. Never talk about racism. Never talk about transphobia. Never talk about conflict in the workplace. We're all friends because we're terrified of the explicit conflict. And we might think of explicit conflict as like this fish that's like it's had enough. You know, it's not going to be underwater anymore, and it leaps up above the surface. And we tend to fear that big fish. It's like a shark, where like it's gonna swallow us whole, you know, devour us. Yes. I'm just like, oh yeah, no, I am scared of that, actually. Maybe because we have had experiences of being devoured by a big fish in the past. Then we try to keep the fish underwater. But you may have noticed that the longer you keep a fish under the water, you know, in the metaphor, maybe not in real life, but the longer you keep a conflict fish under the water, the more it wants to jump, like the bigger it becomes, the more strain there is, and the more likely it is that at some point it will surge to the surface in an uncontrollable, intense way. And so there's a few things that we might want to remember about that. The first of which is that inside every giant fish, there's like a little fish at its heart. And that little fish is what again? It is an unmet need. Yeah. Um, so, this thing that we fear, this terrifying explicit conflict that's so unpredictable and we don't know what it will reveal. I mean, what I think we can be sure that explicit conflict, whether, intentional or unintentional, reveals is an unmet need or a series of unmet needs at its heart, which is very difficult to remember. But if you ever think, if you've ever been in a conflict with someone you love, raise your hand if you've ever been in a conflict with someone you love. Have you ever felt that feeling of just like, you're not getting it, you're not hearing me? Anyone feel that before? Yeah. Or maybe someone said that to you, you're not getting it, you're not hearing me. That's an unmet need. So, I mean, probably two. The first need is, I need you to hear me and understand me. And then the second is whatever it is I need you to hear and understand about, right? So if we start to reframe it in that way, inside the heart of every big fish is a little fish, an unmet need. Maybe we start to be able to get deeper into the relational web, right? Like into the strand and really understand it. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is like, I, as like an organizational mediator, like to encourage that we just bring the fish to the surface in general, right? Who here is afraid of conflict? Raise your hand. Like that's like bringing the fish to the surface, right? Like, oh, let's talk about the impact of power dynamics or social injustice on our experiences of conflict. The truth is that all of us are afraid of conflict, but maybe some of us have like an actual literal fear of being killed because of our racialization or because of our trauma histories, right? So when we like start to name these things, what we're doing is we're bringing the fish to the surface intentionally, which, to be real, doesn't always make them more pleasant to experience, but it does allow us to make contact with them intentionally rather than by surprise. And let me just go ahead and tell you that surprise conflict tends to be everybody's least favorite kind of conflict. If we can anticipate and prepare a little bit, then usually the nervous system is able to integrate more smoothly what is happening, which then allows us to get curious. What is the need that is going unmet here, right? It might be a need in an individual, right? Like like I feel insecure around my sister and I need my parents to pay attention to me, right? That might be a need in an individual. It might be a need that is relational. We're not understanding each other. We need to find a new way to communicate. It might be a need that is like embedded in like a social movement or a social issue. We actually like need to unpack the history of social injustice, and where there has been a mass perpetration of cultural violence, there needs to be like a mass reckoning of cultural repair, right? So, there's lots of levels to these things. But the intentional raising of conflict into the explicit realm allows us to do that. When we leave conflict in the unconscious or the implicit, when we keep those conflicts under the water, we are not able to control or be intentional about how they surface themselves, which is often where damage occurs relationally, right? Or physically. So we're just, being with that. Okay, let's see. So that is the fish metaphor. Okay. I'm now showing you a slide that I almost always use in conflict presentations that I like to call the window of transformation. And it is an adaptation from Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Pat Ogden's window of tolerance model. So some of you might have seen a model called the window of tolerance before. Essentially, the window of tolerance has become a very foundational tool for conceptualizing nervous system responses to stress. And there's a lot of nuances to the window of tolerance, which I'm not going to get into today, but essentially the window of tolerance is like a theory that says that the nervous system has two main branches of response to stress. The first branch being sympathetic dominant hyperarousal, just meaning the body heats up, that there's like a rapid heart rate. It's sort of like an activating response to stress, the fight or flight response. And then another branch that is parasympathetic dominant, but still also somewhat sympathetic, which is like a lowered heart rate response to stress. So often we call that the freeze, the unmoving, or maybe like hypotonic response to stress. The response to stress that's trying to survive by shutting down. Yeah. So we use the window of tolerance model to understand the nervous system's response to stress, and often we use it in trauma psychotherapy. I have adapted this model just to kind of reflect what I like to call the window of transformation. Why transformation? Well, this is conflict specific. So if we're thinking about the nervous system's response to conflict, which I encourage us to do when we take like an embodied lens on conflict, we might start to think about, okay, so when we're in relational conflict, when the fish jumps above the water, or when we start to detect a fish jumping above the water, what does the body start to do? It will generally tend to do one of those two main types of response, an activating response or like a deactivating response. And we can map onto the fight or flight, freeze kind of typology, some conflict styles or strategies. And what I like to say about this before I go deeper is that, you know, we use a lot of different conflict strategies. The conflict strategy we might use with our boss at work is often different from the conflict strategy we use with our children, right? Like the body does different things automatically to different people. It's almost always relational. But regardless of what we are doing, most people will default to the strategy that feels the most survivable in the moment of conflict. Like actually conflict brings up this terror inside us. And for many people, it's like a bottomless terror. Like I'm bad, they're bad, I'm in danger, I'm dangerous to other people, I might lose like this sort of like ongoing, endless cacophony of fear. The body will do whatever is most survivable in that moment. Like whatever feels like the most survivable strategy is what we will do. I do not know about you, but I actually physically feel like I'm dying when I'm in conflict. Anyone else? Like I feel like I'm having a heart attack and dying. Yes. It's an awful feeling. And in the same way that, you know, trauma, like somatic trauma therapy teaches us to understand trauma as a process in the body, we might start to think about conflict as a process in the body. It's relational, and we tend to focus on the relational in conflict, as we should. The relational is very important. But what will dictate our relational or unrelational behaviors tends to be whatever is going on in the body. And whatever is going on in the body in conflict tends to be extremely painful. Whether it's like actively sharp painful or like the pain of numbing, like not being present and wanting to feel alive. Right? And so because it's so intense, really what most of our strategies are oriented toward is like getting through the pain of what's happening in our bodies and then getting rid of it as quickly as possible. Because it is just so intense. And that's quite different, actually. Like if we're always focused on what's happening in here and trying to get rid of the terrible sensations, which is what we're going to default to do, that is actually pretty different from attending to the other person or people that we're in conflict with and being like, huh, what's happening for you, right? You know, we know that's what we're supposed to do, but it's pretty difficult when we're like, I'm having a heart attack, actually. So I just want to say that, like, maybe it helps us to reorient, and maybe it also helps to destigmatize what people are doing. Like, again, that shame is so present around our conflict strategies. Oh, I did it wrong, I did it badly, right? They're doing it wrong, they're doing it badly. It tends to be a cycle. We're like, oh, I'm doing it badly. No, they're doing it badly. No, wait, maybe I'm doing it badly. You know, but we can maybe instead of badly, we can think about, oh, okay, so that's what feels the most survivable to them in this moment. That's what feels survivable to me in this moment. How interesting, right? How very interesting. So conflict strategies are oriented towards survival. And what's interesting is when we start to find ourselves doing that hyper-aroused response, which is the heated up response, right? The heart rate increase response to conflict, the strategies that emerge will tend to be destructive of relationship. Destructive to the other, right? I've got to destroy them, or destructive to the self. I've got to destroy myself, or destructive to the relationship. I've got to get out of here, right? The fight or flight responses will try to destroy the connection in order to relieve the body of the feeling of threat. Which is actually a very good idea when we are in conflict and whatever kind of relationship is happening is actively harming us and we don't want it. We probably should get out of there. I don't know if like attacking the other person is the most helpful thing, but sometimes we do need to stand up for ourselves, right? So there's a lot of value in the destructive strategy. When we start to get into the more parasympathetic dominant strategies, like the submission-based strategies to conflict, which are represented down here below, we start to go more into preserving the relationship through non-action or avoidance of confrontation. So those of us who tend to be kind of like in the like helping arts or the healing arts often will do this thing like performative change kind of style of conflict where we're like, oh yes, you're absolutely right. Everything you're saying is absolutely right. I completely get you. And it sort of looks like a very functional strategy. And it is functional. It helps the conflict to go away because the other person feels placated or soothed. And the main sort of emotional tone that we tend to get when we're doing this strategy is like one of shame or guilt. And so, yes, this is a strategy that makes conflict go away in the moment. What's unfortunate about this strategy is it tends to focus on preserving relationship in the short term at the expense of the long term, which is to say, when we are doing like a sort of performative change in response to someone else's demand, we make commitments that we actually are not going to keep or cannot keep. And people notice that in the long run. And that ends up being more destructive to the relationship than the initial conflict, because then they feel like they've been lied to. I just wonder if that's like happened to anyone here, where somebody was like, you were mad at someone, they were like, yes, 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 and then they just didn't change. Yeah, and probably it felt like even worse after you were like, wow, this didn't change because they were just lying to my face, right? And maybe you've done that yourself, or you've promised to change and actually just didn't follow through because it wasn't going to work out, right? And so we just want to be aware when that's happening. And the deeper we go into that kind of like collapsing, freezing, fawning sort of strategy, the more we sort of enter what I like to call like a fragility kind of strategy, which is where it starts to show through that we're like, oh my God, please don't hurt me, right? Like the sort of like, don't hurt me. You're right, I'll do anything, right? This sort of like activation of like a victim role that might bring out sympathy in the person that you're in conflict with, or sympathy from the people around you. Which also is very effective in some cases at like getting someone to stop being like actively confrontational with you, but tends to not be helpful, again, for a long-term, ongoing, sustainable relationship, because the victim or the fragility role means that the other person is being pressured, whether intentionally or unintentionally, not to reveal their authentic experience to you. So it's a balance. Again, not to stigmatize any of the strategies because they are effective for what they're trying to accomplish. But if what we really want is ongoing, sustainable, transformative relationship, we want to aim for this window of transformation, which is that space inside the self, an embodied physical state where we are able to hear difficult feedback, we're able to withstand the other person articulating their unmet need, sometimes in ways that are quite unpleasant. Right? So we take in what they're saying, integrate it into our experience, and then respond in a way that is curious and compassionate, but also still boundaried. I know, just that, right? So easy. Um, this is what we are aiming for, the window of transformation, that place where we are able to be curious and compassionate and boundaried all at the same time in response to someone voicing an unmet need, which is really hard. And it tends to be the hardest when someone is A, being very unpleasant, and B, telling you that you are the reason that their need is going unmet. Like, it's a lot easier to be like, to hear someone saying, my need is unmet and it's this thing over here, not you, right? But when it's about us, that is really quite threatening, or feels really quite threatening in the body. So how do we get into this window of transformation, as a miracle window of transformation? Well, it's very helpful when other people are trying to do it too, right? Like, people will often say to me, well, what if I'm trying to get into my window of transformation, but the other person isn't interested? A very good question. I didn't say it was easy. Yeah, we could laugh. Like, it's just hard. It's actually just hard to do conflict. It's always really hard. Well, first we need to decide whether we want to try. Like, maybe some relationships just aren't worth it, right? Like, if I'm being screamed at in the parking lot by a stranger, I don't know if I need to enter the window of transformation. I might just say, yes, very good, sir, bye. Like, we might just go away. If I'm a person of color and I know that the cops are not like safe people for me, then I would just do whatever they say because, we're just gonna get out of the situation. So we don't actually always need to be going for this kind of like deeply relational window of transformation model. It's only when it's worth it, like actually when it's worth it. Someone we love, right? Maybe someone we're in a long-term co-working relationship, our children, right? Romantic partners, that kind of thing. So we get to decide, first of all. And then second, I always say the easiest way to help someone be in their window of transformation is to be in your own. Which means, like, we come back to co-regulation, right? Like, which is this feeling of when we're with someone else who is managing, like being their okay, finding their okayness, we get to find our own. And when it's two adults, relatively equal adults, in conflict with one another, then it's sort of like a loop, right? One person starts and the other person follows. And then we just kind of follow one another in a loop of like trying to find that place. Maybe one person is trying and the other isn't interested. What I might suggest is we just notice that. Oh, so I'm trying to find this place where I really can hear you. Would you be willing to try to do that for me? Right? I really want to understand what you're saying. Would you try also to understand me? And I'll try to understand you first. It's like a gift that we can give people. I'll try first, we can try and get them there. And they might say, no, 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 I don't want to do that. And that tells you something very important about the interaction, which is that if they are unwilling and do not want to go to the window of transformation with you, they will not on that day, right? So maybe we can stop the conversation and wait for another day when it is possible. Yes. Okay. So there's something about the other person. It's always like it's a relationship. However, we also really need to be able to kind of do some amount of regulation or emotion management, distress tolerance for ourselves. So what I'm about to show you is like a little technique that I like to use for being with sensation in the midst of intense conflict. And you can use this with clients, like therapy or coaching clients or mediation clients as well. If you're going to use it with mediation clients, I would use it in a one-on-one setting and not in joint caucus because that's just not safe. But if you can assist people with this one-on-one is sort of what I would say. This practice can be used as a journaling exercise for folks who are sort of who will feel more comfortable or like it's more accessible to write things down in a step-by-step sequence. But it can also just be done as like a guided meditation or like a very quick like somatic check-in. It's inspired by the RAIN method from Tara Brach, as well as the Vimbasi and Saibam methodologies that come from somatic abolitionism and somatic experiencing, and Katie Sarah's body poem. And it's really like a basic practice, like it's a simple enough practice. We start by noticing that we are having activation, like that the fish is starting to jump above the surface, right? And that we're starting to have a response to conflict. And the first step is to notice sensation. Like, what does it actually feel like on a body level? Which for a lot of us is very hard, actually. Like, we'll stay stuck in the thoughts, like, that person's doing this, and this because of this, and right? Like, we really stay stuck in the story about conflict. So it can be quite a challenge. We need to sort of pause and really like hone in on like, what's happening in the body? Oh, my heart is increasing. I'm sweating. I'm clenching my fists. I'm not present. Like I feel shut down. I'm bored. I'm numb, right? I'm just trying to get to the basic building blocks of sensation. Once we have a sense of that, it can be very brief, right? Oh, I'm flushed, right? Like we're kind of heated up. Then we go to the mood or emotion of the sensation. Like if you were going to guess what is the emotion or the mood of this sensation, what would you say it is? Oh, I'm saying I'm angry. Okay, so it's angry. So you're heated up, and it's like an angry kind of heat. Then we go to language. If this emotion had a voice and could speak, what would it say? And we're again really trying to focus on like the emotion itself, right? Like the body itself, what is it saying? We're trying to link like the left brain process of making story and logic to the right brain process of felt experience. When we are able to do this, it's often a sense that is very empowering. Like, oh my gosh, I can put language onto my feelings. It's very difficult for a lot of people, myself included. So let's go back to this. Oh, so it's flushed and it's heat and it's angry and it's saying, why can't this person just listen to me, right? Why can't they just listen? Okay, right? Why can't they just listen? And then we go to validation. What is this response trying to do? How is it trying to serve or save you? What kind words does it need to hear? So this is a compassion step. I wish they could just listen. Why can't they just listen? You really want to be listened to. It makes sense that you want to be heard. It wants you to be understood. That makes all the sense in the world, right? We validate response. And we can validate almost any response, like embodied response to conflict, which is really key, right? So when we are in like a conflict and we're stuck in story, there tends to be this like, am I right or wrong? And I can only validate the right person, right? But we can always validate emotion. So, let's say I'm with a child and the child has, I don't know, thrown a toy truck at me and it hurt, right? That child is wrong. Also, they're a child, so it's fine. But this comes from working in child psychiatry, had a lot of trucks thrown at me. So they throw a truck at me, it's not great. So but we go to the sensation, okay, so what's happening? I feel terrible. Okay, what's the mood of terrible? I'm mad, you're mad. Okay, what would it say? It would say, you're stupid. Oh yeah, okay, I don't feel stupid. What's that about? Oh, she was mean to me. She didn't listen to me. She didn't let me have my snack on time, right? Oh God, yeah, it makes so much sense that you're mad at this grown-up because you wanted your snack. It makes sense, right? It makes sense you wanted your snack. We can always validate emotion, even if we can't always validate position, right? We cannot always validate position. Like, it's not right to throw the truck. It's not right to have like an unjust social stance, but we can validate anger or fear, need. And then expanded awareness. So this is the step that is unique to conflict practice. Methods of self-regulation or self-introspection like RAIN or Vimbasi are mostly about like introspection of the self, right? And then there's sort of a coming out after. But when we're in conflict, what we're wanting to do is notice what conflict response is coming out of us, validate it because it's usually trying to save our lives, and then expand our awareness. So, I'm heated, I'm flushed, I wish this person would just listen to me. Of course, I want to be listened to, that makes so much sense. And then we take a breath and do expanded awareness. How does this align with your values? Right? How does this embodied response line up with how you actually want to be in relationship with this other person. Oh, well, this other person is just someone who yelled at me in the parking lot and I don't know them. So I want them to understand me, but maybe they're not going to do that and I could probably just walk away, right? That's the expanded awareness piece, placing our embodied response in the context of the broader web of relationship and reality around us. It's a mediation skill of reality checking, right? That we don't always do in psychotherapy because that's not always the point. But when we're doing conflict transformation, we actually really do need to do this like reality checking, expanded awareness piece, because it allows us to place our embodied response on a scale of like, how much do I actually want to keep doing that, right? And what are the other choices? So when it comes to, the example of the child throwing the truck, the expanded awareness piece is like, okay, so I'm mad and I'm upset that I didn't get my snack. I'm sad I didn't get my snack. How does that fit with how you want to be with this grown-up, right? Like, how do you want to tell Miss Thom that you need your snack? By throwing the truck, is that going to get you the snack? No, right? So it's like this other way, right? Yes. And when we're talking about adults, right, we might feel like rage or terror or collapse, right? How does that fit with an expanded awareness? How do I want to be in relationship with this other person? And often it takes quite a bit of time. Like it takes like a break from the conflict conversation to do that and then come back. And so when we have the time, it's really important to try and give ourselves that moment of pause. Sometimes we don't have time, conflict is happening, and I might just advise folks to say, oh, I need to take a moment just to make sure I'm really listening to what you're saying, right? And then we go in, okay, what's happening to my body? What's the mood? What's it saying? It's saying I'm really pissed off. Okay, makes sense that you're mad. So the person's saying, right. How does this fit with how I want to show up? I want to show this other person that I'm trying to be compassionate, right? Okay, how do I do that? So we can do it quickly. We can spend a long time on salve, but it is a tool that I encourage us to try to use. Before we practice, I will just show you one last thing, which is my metaphor of power dynamics. So when we are in conflict, very important to be aware of the power. If a child has just thrown a toy truck at me, that hurts, but I am the adult, right? And so actually I have a different level of responsibility than the child does. If I'm in a conflict with an adult, that's different. If I'm in a conflict with an adult, but they are my boss at work, that's also different. The expanded awareness piece really is very helpful when we're trying to notice, like, okay, what is the power dynamic in a conflict and how does it shape our responsibility? Like, my embodied response might be one of like deep, overwhelming need and like grief. That's saying like, I really need this other person to hold me. But if I am their boss, like, actually expanded awareness reminds me that they cannot always do that. And that's not always appropriate. I need to be held by other people because of the power dynamic and the ethics, right? So there are many types of power. The one we tend to think about is power over, which is the power to make other people do what we want, more or less, like in a conflict, through domination and control, through the threat of punishment. That is the defining feature of power over, is the use of punishment or force to make other people do what we want. And the truth is that when I am like a child psychotherapist in a psychiatric ward in a hospital, I always have power over the children who are the patients, whether or not I like that. I always have that power and I have to be responsible for it. There's also power under, which is the power to resist. It's like the struggle of those who are in the power under position. And whether we like it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not, people in positions of power over tend to have some fear of power under. When we are the boss, like when we're employers, we're actually always afraid that our employees are going to get mad at us. It's just true, you know? When I'm like teaching a classroom of children, I am actually a little bit scared that the children are going to all like kind of flip the tables all at the same time, right? That just is the thing. And what we really want to watch is when we're in conflict with, and there are different levels of power involved, power over and power under engage in conflict as power struggle. Power under is trying to get itself into the power over position, and power over is trying to hang on. And because power over is trying to hang on and afraid, often what will come out is like a punishing response. And that is something we really need to be aware of as people who have power in the world. And at some point in our lives, all of us will be in the power over position. Maybe some of us more than others, but always at some point you'll find yourself in the power over position, and we need to be able to remember that. Because the window of transformation, what Salve is trying to teach us to work toward, or trying to help us get to, is a conflict style, a resolution style that is about power with, deciding together, how are we going to do this together? What are we going to do? What's the plan that meets everyone's need? How can we meet your need and my need at the same time? That's the power with style. In order to get there, we have to be able to do power within, which is what the Salve technique is about. It's about cultivating the power within. Power within, essentially, is the ability to withstand overwhelming sensation in the body in response to conflict. That feeling of I'm dying, power within allows us to withstand and work with so that we can reach for the other person and do power with, right? Power within reaches out to make power with. And everyone in a human responsible society has the a responsibility to find their power within, but some of us more than others in any given conflict scenario. Who has more responsibility to find their power within? Anybody know? I'll just say, it's when you're in the power over position. When you have power over someone, you have more responsibility in a conflict to find your power within, to hear their hard feedback, to get into your window of transformation, to use the Salve practice or whatever it is, because that is what ethical use power is. And that's what that last step is often about. Salve is like, what's happening in my body? Okay, what's the emotion attached to that? What are the words that come with it? Oh, how is that trying to save me? Okay, that response makes sense. Like any response. I want to throw this kid out the window. That does actually make sense, like from an emotional logic. But the expanded awareness tells us, oh, we're never going to throw a child out the window, right? The expanded awareness step is, I have power and positionality in this. I have to show up in a particular way. Or the other person has some power over me, and I need to remind them that they have power, right? Like, that's what that expanded awareness step is about, okay? So let's just take 5 minutes and do Salve together, okay? If you want to, you don't have to. But you might just like do a wiggle like a worm, a shake like a snake, a slither like a critter, I don't know. And then just pause and take a breath. In a moment, I'm going to invite you to think about a conflict that you've had in the past. Not the worst conflict, not like a life-threatening conflict. Just like a regular old, I'm annoyed at my mom kind of conflict, or like, oh, this kid said something kind of hurtful to me, or my pet pooped on my shoe, like, like a smaller level conflict, right? And just notice what sensation this is already bringing up. And if it's like too much for today, maybe just like stand up and shake it off. You don't have to do the exercise today. Or pick a different conflict, right? Just like, if it's okay, just like notice, okay, I'm thinking of something, find your conflict. And then if it's okay, just go into that. And just notice on a body level, what's the sensation that's happening? And then just, if the sensation had a mood or a tone, what mood would that be? Give it a name, right? You could even write that down. And if this sensation had a voice and could speak, what would it say? If this sensation had a voice and could speak, what would it say? Yeah. Maybe even write that down or say it out loud to yourself. And then let's just find some part of ourselves that can actually be compassionate to that. Whatever it is that this sensation said, I imagine it's trying to save your life in some way. How is it trying to save your life? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So spending a little extra time here, just like even sending some gratitude if that's possible to this embodied response, like it's trying to help. And then just maybe taking a long breath in and a longer breath out. Yeah. And just like expanding, like even like imagining your internal perspective is like a camera lens and you're zooming out. Just like noticing like how does this embodied response fit or not fit with your values? Like, who do you want to be in this conflict? And your, super amazing, helpful first response, maybe that is a part of how you want to show up. Like maybe you do want to bring a part of it, or maybe you don't. But either way, just like trying to bring in this sense of like, in the time before the conflict or outside of the conflict, who do I want to be? How can we bring that in as well? I'm just noticing what images or emotions or words show up there. Okay, oh, Amy, I might invite you just to open the chat, please. And just folks, I invite you to share in the chat like what you noticed through that very brief practice. What did you notice? Mhm. It's okay to have needs. Yeah, it's okay to have needs. Beautiful. What else? Curiosity into motion, able to get to just faith and not fear. Fear, racing heart. Tension in my body was connected to not only this conflict, but past unrelated conflicts. Yeah, beautiful. I try to protect others. My mom is a human being with flaws and feelings. Compassion for why the other person may have felt angry. Self-advocacy is necessary. Softening of my response. Tension in my jaw from built-up anger. I can't change the other person, only point my reality to the other moment. I realized I was threatened to be rejected when my daughter replied with anger. My original conflict was silly and unnecessary. Oh, I felt like a little kid and that my needs were important. Anxiety in the form of stomach ache. Resistance to lean into the conflict, compassion for the other person. Yes, my anger was transformed in a deep understanding with the source. Feels so much better now. I always want to fix things without acknowledging my own needs or trauma. It would have helped to talk about my needs earlier in this conflict. I got lost and couldn't follow you at some point. Fair enough, fair enough. There'll be a recording. um, yes. My inner child is having a tantrum. What about me? I don't deserve this. I want to be respected. It's harder to tune into my power when I'm in sensory overload. Yeah, so many beautiful responses for me. And I just want to kind of reflect and model like, yeah, all of that is welcome. And like some of you are like, oh wow, that was like something like interesting and important, good happened. And some of you are like, whoa, it's a lot. And like, yeah, all of that is like welcome. Each response is showing us something about what we need in response to conflict. And we don't always need to tell the other person what our needs are, or like sometimes the other person can't meet our needs. It just depends on who they are and what the conflict is. But we can always start to attend to our needs in a deeper way. We can always validate our own needs because it's okay to have them, as someone said. Yeah, beautiful. Okay. So that is the self practice: sensation, affect, language validation, and expanded awareness. An embodied tool for self soothing and self exploration in response to conflict. You can journal it, you can meditate on it, You can take clients through it. You can walk through it as like a partner or like a triad activity. I'm just seeing the more we do, maybe the easier it becomes. So we have about 7 minutes to do questions. So I'm going to open the Q&A box. Please put your questions into the Q&A box. And I might take 1 or 2 live, like voice-based questions as well. But we don't have that much time. And I will also just gently remind people that because this group is so big, and because I don't know where you are in the world, this is not really a time to ask very detailed personal questions about your personal process or specific conflicts that you have had, but just please try to focus on concept and technique. It's safer that way relationally and more responsible on my end, like yeah, so. Yes, okay, so let's see. A question is, I always stumble on how the word performative is used in the therapy world when it is used to suggest insincerity and or lying. Is there a better word we could use here? Oh my gosh, what a great question. You know, we could even just come up with some words in the chat. I like the word performative because, well, let's see. I think sometimes we are insincere in conflict. And I just want to destigmatize the fact that for some, lying or maybe not being fully honest is how we have saved our own lives. Like in the face of threat, saying whatever the other person needed to hear, even when it wasn't true, maybe worked. And that's okay. It's not ideal for like a relationship patterning, right? It's not ideal, but it is what many of us have had to do. One of my favorite poets and mentors, the writer Amber Dawn, has in her memoir a line that says, lying is the work of those who are taught that their truths have no value. And I just love that. I just really love that. And also, when we're working with clients or ourselves out in the world, they might not want to hear the word performative. And so I said, well, let's brainstorm with that. What word feels good for you? Yeah, really good question. Okay. Cosmopolite, I think that is the screen name, or maybe that is your name. Cosmopolite, would you like to ask your question out loud? I think it's here in the Q&A as well.
Sure. So my question is, I know that you said when you have power over someone, you have more responsibility to move into power within.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have power under someone, is there a way to get you and the other person to move into power within, or are you just kind of stuck and at the mercy of the person that has power over you?
That's a really great question. Oh, yeah, deeply complex. Thank you for that. Well, it's a very sensitive topic. And I think in some cases, yes, we are at the mercy. Like, for example, when we are children, and I know that probably we're all adults here, but when we were children, we were in the power under position with pretty much all the adults in our lives. And like, as children, like didn't have either the responsibility or the skill set probably to bring the other person into the power within dynamic. And if we were using that skill set, it still probably wasn't the greatest because that is not what children are meant to be doing with the adults, right? So in some cases, no, but in some cases, yes. Like when we were adults, for example, I'm a Asian transgender woman, and there are just white cisgender people out there who have lots of power over me. But I am an adult actually, and I have a lot of skills. And sometimes I'm in rooms full of people who are like, this gender thing is ridiculous, and even though it is hurtful to me and it shouldn't be my responsibility, I am able to use many tools like to say, hey, I promise to treat you with dignity and respect, and I need you to do the same for me, right? Or the kind of balancing question, I want to really know about your inner experience. But I also want you to do that for me too. And I might just, I'd like to name that there's a power dynamic here, right? When we name power dynamics, sometimes that helps people. I'd just like to remind us all, some of us here are managers and some of us are employees, right? So when we can do that, the more we model that kind of like grounded but authentic questioning of what is happening around us, it is like an invitation for people to come into their own grounded awareness. And that can help. And then the last thing I will say is, when we're in the power under position, the person with power over tends to have the responsibility to bring like integrity and listening and like capacity. The responsibility that we have as adults in the power under position, if we want to continue the relationship like a sustainable way, we actually do have to be open to a repair attempt that is imperfect, right? We have the power to reject like an imperfect repair attempt. And if we keep doing that habitually, we're not going to restore the relationship. So that's usually the big thing. Like when we're talking about social issues, like social oppression, if we want to move into sustainable ongoing relationship, and maybe we don't, like that's fair if we don't, but if we do, the responsive, like the little piece we can carry is we can say, I know you're gonna get this wrong. Like it's gonna keep on happening that, I don't know, people are gonna make racist jokes at work, but the working toward change is what allows us to be in relationship. Yeah, so that's what we can do. And it's a lot, it's sensitive. Yeah. I'm gonna take one more question from the Q&A. There's so many wonderful questions. Repeat the name of my mentor poet friend. Amber Dawn. Amber like the color, dawn like the time of morning. Amber Dawn. And the memoir is How Poetry Saved My Life. And one more question from the chat. How do you balance meeting people where they are and enabling? Such a good question. I would do the self practice, like to see if like what's coming up is like, I need to make them feel okay. Often there's like a feeling inside us when we enable that's like, I need them to feel okay. And it's like, do we? Do we need them to feel okay? Why do we need them to feel okay? Could they find okayness on their own if we didn't help them? Right? This is like the boundary setting skill of like, when we're in conflict with someone, maybe we want to make them feel better so we are safer. But if we can get to a safe enough place for ourselves, then we don't need to enable bad behavior in order to get through. Meeting someone where they're at is like kind of the stance of, I want to know about your inner world, and your emotions most definitely have a logic to them inside of themselves. That does not mean I need to agree with your story of why your emotions exist or condone any particular behavior. Like when a child throws a truck at me because it's not snack time yet, I'm like, it makes all the sense in the world. You're hungry and you need your snack. I don't have to condone this truck throwing behavior, actually. And there are other ways to communicate with me that you are hungry. That's the difference. Okay, so that's all the time we have. I need you to get to the rest of this wonderful summit. Big thank you again to Oyemi and to Jamila. Thanks to all of you for showing up and for your amazing questions. I'm so sorry we weren't able to get to them all. Lots of love. Take good care.
Thank you, Kai.